Good morning, FCC family. It is a real joy to be back here with you. We were here, the last time we were here, I believe it was January 2015. It was Super Bowl Sunday, and we had a delicious meal in the hall after the service, and then at about 2 o'clock, I'm not sure who it was, but somebody ran in and said, "The next blizzard is coming, everybody leave!" And that was like, okay, thank you, bye. And we got in the car. And I had to be reminded how to drive in American winters again as the next blizzard blew in. But we were also here last night for the Coffee House Ministry. What a great opportunity to share out here and in the garden out back. Elizabeth did a great job as the host, and it was a lot of fun to do that. And you're right, Stephen. I was so tempted in 1988, when the phone call came, would you consider being our associate? I was leaving a ministry in Leroy, Illinois, which is down by Bloomington, and was very surprised to get the call. Somebody had just given my resume to somebody up here and said, "This is the guy you need." And boy, I was that close, because I love this area. I love this church. I love this city and the way that you are impacting it. And I wanted to be a part of that. And then my wife said, "Yes, we do. But remember, we've already said yes to England. If we come here, are we going to go to England? Or are we just going to say that was what God called us to do and be and not acknowledge it?" And I've at times said it's her fault. But you know what? It's not her fault. Because we've had to counsel other people over the years that have said, I've heard God's call, but I just can't go. And we've had to be able to talk with them about just honoring the call that God has placed on your life. And so come full circle to see Steve at North American a few years ago when he said, "Our church would like to talk to you about your ministry in England and being partnered with you." And so we are ministering right alongside with you. And love the fact that God, in His providence, brings us back to a place that really, really tempted me many years ago, that we get to actually be here and to minister with you. So thank you for being a part of our ministry. Thank you for being a part of our ongoing journey of figuring out how to do ministry, how to do evangelism and church planting in such a dry, barren place. Thank you for being a part of that with us. Means the world. I'm not going to get into our ministry yet, so if I start to go there, Steve, just go time out, that's later, and I'll carry on. A few years ago, we were traveling on furlough, and our daughter, I don't remember how young our children were, but they were pretty young, and we were going to meet a friend of mine, my college roommate. We were going to meet in a little town in Kentucky below Louisville that... below Louisville, where he had a private plane. He had his own little Cessna plane at a little municipal airport. And he said, "This is where it is." And we said, "Great, we'll get there." So we were driving along the way, and we thought we would stop at like a gas station and ask about where this little airport was. Now, forgive me if anybody has Kentucky roots. I went to college in Kentucky, so I feel like I can do this. We went into the gas station, and the lady said, "You go down here through about 3 lights, and it'll be on your left. You can't miss it." And as my daughter, who at the time was about 9, I think, loves to retell the story, says, "She told us we couldn't miss it, and we missed it." We had the directions. We knew where we were meant to be going, but we missed it. We eventually got there. We thought we were on the right path. We thought we were following the directions exactly as they had been told to us. But somehow we got lost. Somehow we lost our way in trying to find that airport. In this moment of tenderness, in this story today, Jesus is sharing with His best friends, with His followers, exactly that route. I'm pretty sure Jesus didn't have a Kentucky accent, but if He did, He would have said, "You got to love me like you love the Father, and then you can't miss it." He said, in the midst of washing their feet, predicting Peter's denial, teaching about the Holy Spirit, talking about vines and branches, in the middle of all those very, very familiar stories, here's Jesus saying, the bottom line, stay on track. The bottom line is stay on track. Let's read that scripture together. It's John chapter 14. We're going to start with verse 1. Now remember, what is about to happen to Jesus? If you know this story, what is about to happen to him? John 14, he's teaching them vine and branches. They've just had the Last Supper together. He's about to be crucified. He's about to be betrayed. He knows what's coming. And yet how he starts in this teaching is, don't let your heart be troubled. Boy, if anybody's heart should be troubled, it should be Jesus, shouldn't it? He knows what's coming. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. And if this wasn't the case, I would have told you. And I am going away. And that is to prepare a place for you. I want to prepare your own bedroom. It's going to be an ensuite. There's going to be a little chocolate on the pillow. It's going to be one of those that has a fruit and bowl at the end of the bed, and you have your own slippers and your own bathrobe. I am going to prepare a luxurious place for you. If this wasn't the case, I would have told you that. And if, or since I am going away to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, so that where I am, you can be there with me. You know the way to where I'm going. And then Thomas said, Lord, we don't even know where you're going. How can we possibly know the way? And Jesus told him, Thomas, I am the way. I am the truth. I am life. If you come, and no one comes to the Father except through me. If you know me, you will also know my Father. And from now on, you do know him, and you have seen him. Bottom line, stay on track. You know, in our world of intolerance and precious emphasis on tolerance, it's very easy to be offended by Jesus' statement, I am the way. Nobody gets there except through me. That can be a very offensive statement for many, many people. We can be offended because, you know, we all know and love people who would give you the shirt off their backs, who are the most generous, loving people in the world, but they don't know Jesus. We can be offended because we work right next to someone who always is the first one to go out of their way to help their colleagues, and yet they don't know Jesus. We can be offended because we might be married to someone who would give you their very last dime, who is always the first to step up and help someone, but who would not step foot into a church building or claim Jesus. We can be offended because this sounds too narrow. This sounds too intolerant. And the bottom line is, this is scary. This is scary to say he's the only way. And in our day-to-day lives, sometimes it's easy to be offended by that statement. But in Jesus' exchange with Thomas, there is a message that is central to this understanding. Thomas, just keep your eyes on me. Just keep your eyes on me. That's all you have to do. And when you look at me, you see the Father. When you look at me, you see the way. When you look at me, you see everything you need to know to get to where I'm going, to check in to Hotel Jehovah, to stay there forever. And the best way to understand what Jesus is saying is to begin to understand what he means by being the way, the truth, and the life. What does he mean by that? Jesus being the way. I think there's two ways to understand this. The first is the mode. Jesus says, I am the way. That's how you get there. He's your mode of transportation to getting to the Father. That means that by believing and trusting 100% in him, we allow him to transport us. He is our vehicle to get there. And he says, you've learned to trust the Father, and the Father has come to you with skin on. Now you can trust me. Just trust me, and I will be there for you. When we were ministering in downstate Illinois, the church camp that we had was called Little Galilee. And they had a wilderness camp that we would take kids out to every summer, and it was not as rugged as tents and digging your own fire pits and all of that, but it was still more rugged than the catered camp on the other side of the lake. And one year we had about 15 to 20 children, junior hires in our camp, and I thought, we're going to do some stuff to help these kids understand trust. What's it mean to really learn to trust one another and to trust God? And you do the thing where they fall off the table and everybody catches them, and he's like, yay, we did it. Well, I thought, I want to take that a step further. I want to do trust walks in the woods of this camp. And I don't just want one person to be guiding another blindfolded person. I want one person to be guiding 3 blindfolded people at the same time. Sounded like a really good idea. Scoped out the woods. There was this really deep pit that had been dug out in the middle of the woods. So we said we took all the guides and we said that is 100% off limits. Someone will get hurt. Don't do that. These are junior hires. The moment we said there's a pit in the woods, guess what they were thinking? We're taking everybody into the pit. So we blindfolded them, and we had the guides, and we said, you've got about 10 minutes to take them through the woods. It wasn't 30 seconds. And we heard the most blood-curdling screams you've ever heard as 9 or 12 blindfolded children suddenly felt the earth fall out beneath them, and they rolled down the hill into this pit on top of one another. That's not the kind of trust that Jesus is talking about. When he says, you've learned to trust the Father, now trust me. What he says is, I will take you by the hand and I will 100% guide you. I will personally escort you and see that you get to the destination that we're talking about. The Father has issued the invitation, and now he sends the Uber to bring them. Jesus is the Uber. He is the one that God says, I'm providing the lift for you to get to me. So Jesus is the mode of transportation. We get to God, we get to know God through Jesus. It's just simply that simple. John 1, he came from God to help us become God's children. He's the one that accomplishes it. He's the one that gets us there. In Birmingham, you'll hear a bit more about this in a few minutes, but we have what is considered one of the most diverse cities in Europe. We have over 167 mosques in our city. We have over 21 Sikh gurdwaras. We have numerous Buddhist and Hindu temples, some of them the largest in the world. We are an incredibly diverse city. You can't walk down the street without seeing up to 170 different nationalities in our city. But every single one of those gurdwaras, every single one of those mosques, every single one of those temples says, you've got to figure out how to get to God. Jesus says, I'm going to personally take you there. God himself reached down to take us home. Jesus is the way as the mode. Jesus is also the way that the example. He is the way by example. So I am the way. I'm the one who gets you there. And I get you there by you living like me. By you just imitating what I do. The lifestyle of a disciple. Knowing how Jesus lived. Folks, if I can encourage you to do anything, it is to saturate your mind and your life with the stories of Jesus. Saturate them. Not so that you can pound them down anybody's throat, but so that they impact your lifestyle. How did he respond when he was angry? How did he respond when he was scared? How did he respond when he was hungry and alone? How did he respond when the crowd just kept demanding things and demanding things and demanding things? The more we put that into us, the more just by the nature it comes out in those circumstances. Just plan and make a plan and follow that plan to saturate yourself with the stories. When we lived in Nottingham, one of our key ministries was in the local schools. They study religion in the schools in England. I know that sounds incredibly weird in our society, but in England, they understand religion is part of life. Just like knowing your math, knowing your English, knowing your science, why shouldn't we know religions? So that we can learn to respect one another. And that's the plan in it. Not to convert, but to help people get along a bit more with their religious diversity. And as Christians in the community, God just opened up a door for Teresa and I to be the local authorities. When the school said, we've got an issue, we want to deal with sexual ethics, we want to deal with religious intolerance, we want to deal with prayer, we want to deal with how you get to heaven, we want to deal with creation and evolution, whatever that is, I'd get an email from the head of the department saying, we've got about 10 classes that need to study this topic. Could you prepare a talk for us for that age group? And every year we'd have a team from Lincoln Christian University that would come over, and we would take over the RE department, the religious education department, for a week. So in that week, we would see nearly 1,500 students and be able to share Jesus as they reviewed and revised for their exams. That man was a gateway for us, the head of the department. Mr. Carter was his name. He'd grown up an Anglican, Episcopalian. He'd become an evangelical in university. He'd converted to Catholicism because he thought they were the only ones who were really making a difference in the community. And then when he became a teacher of religious studies, he began to get really confused. I see the value of Islam. I see the value of Hinduism. I see the value in atheism. I see the value in Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity. And by the time we got to know him, he loved the lifestyle of Jesus. He just felt that belief was negotiable. You could get to God any way you wanted to, but you needed to be like Jesus. You see, what Jesus says is that actually obedience is the bottom line. Living like him, that's not negotiable. That we get to know him, it's not that we are looking to be perfect. It's that he's our model. He's our example. He's the one I want to be like. That's the core of the model that we use in our Bible studies in England. Did just a little bit of this last night, called the Discovery Bible Study model. Read a story together, kind of get to know it inside and out together, and then you just ask simple questions. What does this tell you about God? What does this tell you about people or about yourself? And assuming this story is true, what do you need to change? And who are you going to tell about this story? A good friend of mine by the name of Dwayne had been a Christian for about 15 years, knew these stories inside and out, but as soon as we started studying this way together, suddenly the stories became his stories. Suddenly they had meaning for his walk. It wasn't just stories in the Bible. They were stories that shaped his character. And that model leads us to obedience. Jesus is the way. I want to be like Jesus. So therefore I have to know how Jesus lived. And you know, trying to imitate or live or understand or know this God that's way out there somewhere, really hard. But as soon as I start thinking about knowing and living and imitating compassion and mercy and love and grace and forgiveness like Jesus lived, it becomes a bit more doable. So Jesus is the way. First point's the longest always, I promise. First point's always the longest. Jesus is the truth. What does he mean by that? You see, I think that could be a real sticking point for a lot of people. He is the truth. Wow. That's a big, bold statement, especially in our world that doesn't really appreciate truth. But if you remember when Jesus stood before Pilate, and Jesus was talking about his kingdom is not of this world, and that unless God allowed Pilate to control him, Pilate would have no control over him, and on the conversation went. Finally, Jesus said something about truth, and Pilate's question was, what is truth? And then turned and walked away and had Jesus crucified. I think Pilate really, really wanted to know. But I also think Pilate really, really lacked the courage to act on that. Acting on The courage, acting on the challenge to know truth takes courage. And when Jesus says, I am the truth, believing that, accepting that, acting on that takes a huge amount of courage or desperation to lay everything down and say, I will believe that. We live in a world in England where religious and racial hate crimes can be prosecuted quite severely. And there's not like a template that says, this is what we mean by racial crime. This is what we mean by religious crime. There's nothing like that. The basis for those crimes is how the person that heard it understood it to be said, how they received it, how they interpreted it in their own lives. That's what makes it a crime. No matter what you say in trying to excuse yourself, how the person heard what you said is the crime, whether it's true or not. And when Jesus says, I am the truth, we've got to ask the question, is there a place for truth in our world which wants to undo everything that's absolute? And the cry of those is, there is absolutely no absolute truth, which they've just made an absolute statement. Because absolute truth means we have to make a choice. When Jesus says, I am the truth, we have to step back and go, do I believe that? Because if I do, it asks for me to make action. It takes steps. And it's more than just taking part in life and doing what you want. It's understanding that Jesus has a track record that we can trust him when he says, I am the truth. Several years ago, we were going to make a train journey from Northampton to Gatwick Airport. And I know how the train lines work in England, and it's better to check ahead to make sure everything's running on schedule. So I phoned the train line to just say, hey, we're going to take my family on the train tomorrow from Northampton to Gatwick. I want to make sure this train's running. Is it on time? I don't want to get to the train station and then have problems. Oh, sir, I can guarantee you in the last 6 months, the train's never been late. There's not been a single complaint. There's not been a single cancellation. You will get to the train station tomorrow morning and you will sail right on through to Gatwick. What a lovely thought. We pulled up to the train station. My mother-in-law was visiting, who at that point, when she was living, was a bit disabled. She'd had a few strokes, needed extra time. Our children were little. We thought we're going to have a day out with Nana on the train. Yeah. We get to the window, and I said, I'd like 2 adults and one, elderly, I can't remember the word, 2 children tickets to Gatwick Airport. And the guy goes, there's no train to Gatwick Airport. I said, excuse me, I just phoned yesterday, and the guy said it's running well on time, last 6 months, no complaints, no cancellations. And he goes, we have been telling them and asking them for the last 6 months to take it off the record, off the timetable. That train hasn't run for well over a year. I was just a little cheesed off. That meant we jumped in the car and drove like crazy around London to try to get to Gatwick. And the day out with Nana became the steam out of the ears, all full of stress. Who can you depend on? Who can you trust? See, I'd done everything that I thought I needed to do, but it wasn't trustworthy. It wasn't truthful. So when Jesus says, I am the truth, we've got to be able to believe him. And he is the evidence of the God that we have been told about. And what is the bottom line that says I can believe him when he says I am the truth? It's the resurrection. If that had not happened, we would not have any discussion about this whatsoever. It would just be another claim in the air. But the resurrection stamps Jesus' authority when he says, I am the truth. I have a slide that I want to put up. Is that okay if we do that? It is a cartoon. Well, it's not a cartoon, but it's an illustration. So I know you can't read that very well, but you can see the stick figures, okay? So on the left, we have 2 people standing together. One says Christian, one says unchurched friend, and the link between them is a bridge that says 5-ton weight limit, okay? And so the Christian is seen here driving a 5-ton truck over the bridge, and it collapses. Below that, we have Christian, and we have unchurched friend, and we have 5 1-ton trucks driving across the bridge at a time. Any idea what that illustration might be trying to tell us? You don't have to do everything at once. Tell me a little bit more about that. Yes, you're right. Keep coming. Cheer him on. He's doing a good job. Come on, man. You're doing good. You are on track. Tell me some more. Yeah. What's your name? Gerald. I'm David. That is excellent, man. Why? Sit down, man. You're good. Gerald, that is spot on. Anybody else have a thought about clarifying that a little bit more? Helping Gerald out. What else do you see in that? Yeah. Does take time. You're right. Okay. Yep. That's right. Okay. You see, if Jesus is the truth, and can I tell you, I believe he is truth. I don't just believe he is the truth. I think he is the definition of truth. And in that, I can be quite compassionate or passionate to make sure that my friends know that. And I can ram Jesus down their throat. And I can find every opportunity to make a spiritual application of, oh, well, you shouldn't have spent the money on that gambling ticket because Jesus hates gamblers or whatever. I can really go to town on him. But is that helping him know Jesus? Or is that kind of pushing him away? It doesn't change Jesus being the truth. And in fact, my unchurched friend discovering Jesus to be the truth for himself is much more likely for me just to get to know this person and build a relationship and interject those loving statements of Jesus, but also to demonstrate Jesus, to live like Jesus, and be true in what I do. Thank you. Right on cue. Excellent summary. I didn't need to say very much about that. And then finally, Jesus is the life. Jesus is the truth. It's how we handle it that can sometimes be difficult. But also, Jesus is the life. Remember John 3:16? God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believed in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Read that story with a group of teenagers a few years ago in Nottingham. And as we sat around the table and we asked some questions and we talked about the whole story of Jesus that's in that chapter where he has the conversation with Nicodemus, we talked about the whole purpose of that statement is we've done things that have offended God, that has broken our relationship with God, and God had to take action and send Jesus for us. I sat around the table with 8 teenagers that had never read the Bible before. They had no idea what any of that was about. But when they heard that, Katie, who's quite a loud, she's 20-something now, but at the time she was about 17, looks at her friends and says, well, if that's true, if it's true that what I did that I regret is what put Jesus on the cross, then I need to confess what I've done to you. I need to tell you what I've done wrong. She'd never heard the word confession before in a Christian context. She'd never read this story before, but that's what spoke to her heart. And her friends around the table went, calm down, Katie. Calm down. Don't need to get all riled up about it. She goes, no, you don't understand. It's not just me that needs to confess. We all need to confess. And then the table got really upset. You're not going to make me do anything I don't want to do. And she went on and on and on and on. Finally, one of the teenagers said, well, if we're doing this, David, you're doing it too. And I was like, absolutely. And then I said, if trust of one another is a little bit difficult, turn off your mobile phones and give them to me so you can't record what each other says. And you've got to promise that what we talk about at this table stays at this table. And they all agreed to that. And for 45 minutes, 9 of us shared some of the deepest, darkest things we'd done that we regretted. Because Jesus said, God so loved the world that he gave his only son so you could have life. And they wanted to know what that life meant, and they needed to unload the things that had created death. That was one of the most powerful and moving experiences of worship I have ever had in my life. Jesus says, this is true. Katie said, if it's true. You see, we transition from death to life because of his death, because of what he's done for us. He is implying that you will have life that will be a total transformation, not just pie in the sky when you die, but steak on your plate while you wait. It's about transformation now. He's talking about life from this moment forward. That while we were yet sinners, God sent Jesus to die for us. Jesus can say, I am the life, because God took the initiative. Because he sent to give us life. Because he is sent to be a true example of God in heaven and what he wants for us. Every other religion says, find your way to something. Find your own way there. God says, no, I am coming for you. I am coming to get you. And that is how you will know life. And you can test the Father's love, Jesus says, through me. In John 20, John says the reason he wrote the gospel was so that we could believe, and that by believing we could have life. Acting on your belief in Jesus is what brings life, because it's his life that you're living. You see, we eventually arrived at that airport in Kentucky, and we had a great afternoon of flying over the county where that airport was set. But I think if we had kept going the wrong direction, it probably would have been physically impossible for us to get there. We would have just been going the wrong direction, getting more and more frustrated, stopping for more stops at gas stations for people going, you can't miss it, and we're going, we missed it. But we had to stop. We just had to stop and reflect and evaluate what's going on here. Why aren't we arriving there? And then to get back on track and watch for the signposts. Folks, there may be in your own life a little bit of a lull in the journey of understanding Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life for yourself. Or it may be that you know people around you. We all know people around us who don't get that, who can't believe it or just haven't been introduced to it. And if you feel that way about your own life or about someone around you, can I ask you to do the same thing that we did in Kentucky? Just stop. Just stop and reflect. Where am I going? Why am I not getting closer to Jesus? Why am I not more like Jesus? Why am I not getting on this road to that destination I want to be on? Reflect, because the Father's taking the initiative. Just let him have the frustration in your hands, the stress in your heart, the lostness in your mind. Father, I'm going the wrong direction. Just let me stop where I am right now. I don't want to keep going that way any longer. Just stop. Just listen to the Father's whisper, just saying, I'm still here. I haven't gone anywhere. I'm right here. And then review. Just review. He's invited us onto a journey with him. that means we invite him to be the guide and the leader. Father, would you, through your Holy Spirit, just lead me? I feel like if I'm in control, I'm always getting it wrong. If you're in control, Father, let me listen to you. That's where saturating ourselves with the stories of Jesus. Oh, I want to be like him. Oh, I want to be like him. Just saturate yourself with those stories. Does that change everything? No. But it tunes you in to his way of thinking. You stop. Saturate. And then remember that on the journey, he has proven himself faithful more than once. And there's no reason to believe he won't do it again. Remember, the open grave demonstrates that. He didn't just die for us. He died and rose again for us, so that he could be the one you look at and say, I'm coming with you. I'm following you. Nobody else has risen from the dead for you. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. If you don't know him, stop, reflect, saturate, and then take a step back into his care. And that might be acknowledging it with your church family. It might be turning to somebody at the end of this service and saying, that's me. Would you pray with me? That might be coming forward and saying, I don't want to get it wrong anymore. We all get it wrong. But when you've got a family that loves you, that's with you and accepts you and knows you, they will walk with you. And then make a plan for just submitting yourself to him 100%. And that might start with committing your life to him again. It might start with being immersed into the life of Jesus. It might mean just confessing, I've gotten it wrong. And we all know that. But I'm going to do my best to get it right with the power of God living in me. May you know Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life today. In his name we pray. Amen.